Syndicate. I'm your co-host, Michael C. Moore.
All right, guys.
If it's lit up, that means you can talk.
Yeah. Small bit with the new type of technology we're using here to mute each other to avoid audio issues. But I'm Jordan G. Marcos, the other co-host. Today we're actually going to be trying something a little bit different. We're actually going to start off today by just talking, just find out how our days have been, how our week has been, and, just catch up with each other, not only for you guys, but for ourselves. So, Mike, tell me, man, how's it been going? What have you been doing this past week?
Well, if I'm honest, this week's been kind of a struggle for me. I haven't been feeling the best mentally, but I am doing some things to challenge myself and kind of get a little bit more disciplined in terms of like getting back in there and doing exercise. And obviously, I think I've fallen off a bit in terms of like making content. So I'm trying to at least post one video a week if possible on my platforms, and I've just came up with a challenge now that I'll be trying to stream every single day without missing a single day, and I'm going to try to see how far I can go with that, just to get kind of in the mix with making content and everything. But outside of that, I haven't really had a whole lot happening that's exciting. I mean, I do have my grandpa's birthday that's coming up this week, by the way. It's going to be Thursday. He's going to be turning 81. That's pretty cool. I got him a nice little surprise in the form of a portable shaver. He was really needing one, so I'm sure he's going to enjoy that. And then I'm also looking forward to jumping on we're going to be featured on our first podcast outside of the Co-Op Syndicate in the form of SR Shotolongo, which, was with our previous guest, but you already know that because that's with you, so...
Yeah, I guess we should probably start with plugging that in there. So Sergio, our first guest, actually invited us back to his podcast, which I actually was his first guest when he started it. So it's kind of nice that, we're kind of working out our friendship there, and we're going to be on the show. It's going to be a bit more loose. Normally we're a bit more script driven here on the Co-op Syndicate. We have topics that we like to share, but Sergio's more of like a open-ended conversation type of guy, so it's going to be pretty interesting how far our conversation goes, especially since his YouTube description now says friendly neighborhood egomaniac. So it'd be nice to be featured on a show where a friendly egomaniac is going to be guiding us in podcast. Go ahead and check him out, guys, if you guys want. I believe his channel is his channel name is just Sergio Sotolongo, right? That's just his name, but the podcast name is SR Shotolongo, SHOWTOLONGO. He's a nice friend of ours. He's going to actually be a recurring guest towards the future as we talk about more inflammatory problems going on in the industry. But Mike, so I mean, you've been tired, man, but like, tell us, like, have you been at least able to think about some new products that you're going to be working on in the next couple of weeks, or?
Absolutely not. I've been like feeling horrible to the point where like I can't think of anything really. So yesterday the only thing I did was I forced myself to get out of bed by just asking myself to do like a small thing at a time, such as like looking through my mail and stuff like that, and then I just built it up like that. But I'm not really trying to think of any massive undertakings right now, because I feel like the kind of pressure, stress that would bring upon me would just make me fail rather than give me the energy to keep going. So I'm just trying to do like a daily discipline, exercising. I'm trying to do this podcast with you once a week, and I'm trying to see if I can get back into streaming. That's about it for right now.
No, yeah, man. I mean, we all have our hardships. I totally understand that, you got to take some baby steps to work it up. I'm in the same boat myself. I mean, I'm behind like a bunch of articles that I've had sitting, on my brain and my notes that I've been wanting to share with people, some opinions that I've wanted, especially with all the stuff going on. Every day something new happens. So I have to talk about my things. Otherwise, I'm behind like 2 months on news, But I'm also, I've started doing the YouTube, and it's been a fun little experiment that I'm trying to work up to now. The next game I'll be covering is The Last of Us, whereas the first game was Spider-Man Miles Morales, which, by the way, you got to get in on that. As soon as you get a chance on the PS5, like jump, that should be your first purchase. It's going to be cheaper and everything else anyway, so it's the perfect buy. But other than that, I'm trying to figure out how I want to do my walkthroughs, let's plays, and playthroughs. Really diversifying in between that, so I can make a good gaming channel that I'm proud of. Because I might as well share what I'm playing. Right, I have an endless backlog. We talk about this all the time. For those of you that don't know, I have like over like 100 games that I have yet to play that I've bought for years and years and never touched. I mean, Michael's always grinding me on that. I'm pretty sure he has his own comments on that.
I was gonna say, what are you planning on doing to diversify? Because as of right now, I see that you're just pretty much doing no commentary. And I had a poll about this on my Twitter like a couple of weeks ago, where basically everyone that voted stated that they definitely like seeing commentary, and most people even like seeing like face cams on their gameplay, because that's gonna be what really makes it different. Compared to most of the Let's Plays, like outside of like having commentary or face cam, the only value I could really see being brought is if like the game's new and it hasn't been shown yet and people want to see the gameplay of it. They'll watch it, but typically they'll flock to the people who get early access to the game. What do you think you're gonna do that diversifies yourself from your competition?
Right. This isn't really me to like compete with anyone, because I'm obviously 100 million miles behind everyone else, especially like, big names that have like millions of subs. This is more like for me to kind of like establish myself as a gaming YouTube channel, and also to kind of learn the ropes as I go along. Like, I'm not trying to from day one hit the ground running and try and be better than the Rad Brad or some of the crazier YouTubers. I'm trying to really just go with the flow and learn what find what I'm comfortable doing, so I don't get bored or stressed out doing it constantly like other people that just give up along the way. But what I'm doing to kind of diversify myself now with what little I have, because I don't have the same setup at home, and of course, I've told you that the noise that my uncle does as a musician will be impossible for recording. But what I've been working on is trying to figure out how I want to play my games and what kind of content I provide. So, for example, in Spider-Man, I provided more of a walkthrough because I was doing like a run on ultimate difficulty, and I was kind of showing people like how to go through it, like how I would do it, using more stealth, incorporating more gadgets into my combat. And then for Last of Us, which is the next thing I'm doing, I'm actually considering not doing a walkthrough, but more of like a watch me play series, where it's like how far I can get before Grounded gets too challenging. So I'm gonna be doing like a fun little experiment, since everyone says that Grounded is like super broken. I'm gonna see how broken it is and how much I can fare the challenge. So it's like I'm not gonna be doing walkthroughs all the time, because I'm not gonna be an expert in every game. But that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Okay, I see. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Well, okay. I wish you the best of luck with that, my man. So I just hope you keep it up. And obviously, I saw you were using. I read your review of Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I saw you were using your actual gameplay like in the article. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. Maybe, who knows? Eventually, you could build that up to actually make like video essay reviews or something like that if you chose to do something like that. So I think that's an interesting start. And hopefully. I know you're dipping your toes in the content creation pond. Hopefully you find something that works for you, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, man, that's definitely the plan. I really created the no commentary videos because I wanted them to supplement my reviews or my discussions or takes during my, or not during, but like for my articles. So it's like I could provide what I'm trying to say in my article and supplement it with a visual explanation, because a lot of times it's very difficult for me to write an article, convey an idea, and then have to scour through like 40 different YouTube videos to find that one specific moment that I want to explain on the article as an idea. So I'm personally doing the gameplay so I could call back to, in this video I did this event and this is what I want to show or demonstrate to people. Kind of like in the article, I actually put up a gameplay of not like high intense combat, but actually a part where Miles he's a little bit challenged with the fact that he's using some of his powers while trying to keep it from his family. And I'm not trying to spoil anything here, but just that specific point that I was able to show that because I had the gameplay ready, so I could just click that. And also it shows my content. I'm not ripping off of anyone else, so I'm not going to get DMCA'd or somebody's going to copyright me or whatever. It's going to be my own thing, so it allows me to really own what I'm trying to show and not bite off of anyone else. That's my plan. So anyways, now that we've kind of had a moment to wind down and just really get into it, why don't we get started with the topic? Do you have it on hand in Google Docs or?
Well, actually, I was thinking we would get started with that typical current event stuff that we always like to do before we talk about other things. I don't know if you saw, if you have you seen any like news that's come up lately, or anything that's kind of caught your eye?
Well, there's actually quite a bit. Okay, so for starters, I guess we could start with something that's gonna really be of craziness to people. I think I'm pretty crazy about it. I'm enthusiastic about it. I'm actually willing to get an Xbox console somewhat. Bethesda is now making an Indiana Jones game, which is completely out of nowhere because Bethesda is a Fallout, Skyrim type of company. They've always made deep RPGs, single player RPG experiences for their fans. They've never really stepped outside of that comfort zone to make single player type of adventures or Uncharted type of deals. So knowing that they're going to make an Indiana Jones game is pretty crazy to me. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's something that I'm excited for.
Well, yeah, I was actually gonna say that I'm super excited for Indiana Jones coming back. I always remembered I saw that one Indiana Jones game as a kid. I don't know where I saw like commercials for it. I was always kind of hyped to kind of play it, but like I don't know. I feel like it's 50% of every LucasArts game project that always gets canceled, and then it never ends up coming up, even though it was gonna be the best thing ever. So finally, we're gonna get that fulfilled, or that promise fulfilled to us, which is super exciting. But even more so than that, everyone here should already know by now that I'm a massive Star Wars fanboy. So the fact that, LucasArts Games is finally going to come back and they're going to start, hammering away and making all these Star Wars games is going to be something amazing. I was hearing speculation that Battlefront 3 is going to be confirmed. A big thing with me and my community where I stream was always Battlefront 2. That's actually how I found the majority of my people in my community. So we're probably going to be looking forward to enjoying that as well.
Well, it's actually been already confirmed that it's in early development. It's just that Battlefield 6 is going to come out first before Battlefront 3, but it is already in development. You could probably expect it within 2 to 4 years.
Damn, 2 to 4 years. That's a while, though. That's crazy. I wish it would be sooner, but who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they'll do something to try to get it out sooner. We'll see what happens with that, though. But Battlefront 3, finally, we're going to have a third one that's going to be amazing. And then I heard that there might be there is going to be an open world style Star Wars game. I think I forgot if it was Ubisoft or if it was the developers of Anthem or something like that. But that's going to be pretty awesome. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to all these different Star Wars titles. I'm probably going to go broke due to the fact that I'm going to have to spend so much money on all these games. But you know what? Bring it on. I'm a Star Wars fan. It's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to come out too fast like how people think. I want to stop right there, though, just real quick, just to reply on a comment that you made about that Star Wars Battlefront 3 seems to be a little far off. I'm actually okay with that, considering the fact that the first Battlefront was kind of rushed and it was small and disliked because of it. And in the second game, they tried to do the same thing where they tried to just do a little bit more effort, but then just monetize it completely. I think that them taking a little bit longer so they don't develop Battlefront 3 and Battlefield at the same time is probably the best choice, so they have enough time and resources to actually apply themselves to each game, allowing for better development. Now, what's going on is another big thing in the news is that Lucasfilms has finally created, or Disney has allowed for the creation of a full umbrella subsidiary of Lucasfilms, being Lucasfilms Games, now being kind of like PlayStation Worldwide Studios and Xbox Game Studios, so that they can have like a housing for all their games that are Star Wars or Indiana Jones based, any Lucas Arts titles. So by that, they now have the ability to create deals with different companies, meaning that EA is no longer the sole exclusive, doesn't hold the exclusive rights to Lucasfilms games or Star Wars games. It could be anyone now. So while EA is making Battlefront 3 and the next Jedi Fallen Order game, if they are making a sequel, Ubisoft the Division company, Massive Entertainment, is actually now doing the Star Wars RPG that you were just mentioning, which a lot of people are hoping that it's some type of bounty hunter Mandalorian type of deal, because it not only does it fit the role of the company being more like an MMOE games as a service type of game, but also because it also fits the ability for like a loot driven or RPG mechanic type of game, whereas a Jedi game would be more focused on the powers. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say you guys. If for anyone who followed me on Twitter, you guys already probably saw that I immediately shared that or that same post that he was talking about. And the first thing I said was like, if you're gonna make an RPG, that's fine as long as it isn't a shit games as a service looter shooter. I said I immediately called for like, hey, stop it with the Destiny clones, stop with the Warframe clones, stop with that crap. If you're gonna make a good game, make it like with a proper story, good multiplayer, all that. And then if you want to add loot and like monetization schemes or whatever afterwards, that's fine. Just don't straight up try to make it a Destiny clone. Like that's all I'm asking for. If it ends up being a good game, of course, obviously being Star Wars, I'm gonna buy it. But if I catch any sort of a whiff of it being like a games as a service type thing, I'm just not gonna get it all. Like that's just what I'm gonna do. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, we have to wait and see. At this point, I feel like these companies have already come to terms that MVP type of games, as we mentioned in one of the previous episodes, or minimum viable products, are not necessarily the right direction to take with games. Especially Ubisoft, massive entertainment, has through the course of Division learned that there's a lot of care that needs to be going into the game, and not to rank in them, but for example, Division 2 is a game that's a little buggy, and it's taken them quite some time to fix the problems, and not all of them have been fixed, which is unfortunate because the game's really great and I enjoy it. And the activities aren't really there. They're just one-off, like run-in and loot grind experiences. So I feel like now that they've come to terms with that knowledge and they know what's going on, especially with the industry, watching Cyberpunk fall and the CD Projekt Red fall from its graces, like companies are now starting to really reevaluate how much effort they got to put into a game and all that. So I'm hoping that with those lessons learned, they can drive forward the development for the new Star Wars game and actually make something that's worth playing. But it's difficult. Again, you can't say, because at the same time they're also making an Avatar game out of nowhere. They're gonna make a big MMO Avatar game like 2 years before the Star Wars, because the Star Wars game is supposed to come out way after that, and the Avatar game is supposed to come out either they should start revealing information at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year to start releasing by 2022. So it's like, I know that Ubisoft teams are big and they normally have like 5 or 6 different studios of like 1,000 employees each working on each game. But it's like, what are they going to try to do? They're starting to. I feel like they're starting to bite off more than they can chew. We have to wait and see. I don't know if you want to add more to that, but that's my opinion.
So for me, I'm thinking about it, and I think honestly that's a red flag. Just because the fact that they have a short turnaround time doesn't mean it's going to be bad per se. But I'm gonna err on the side of caution here and say that that's probably gonna be another minimally viable product they're gonna be trying to release there. The fact that they're, even though with a big studio, I don't know if a 2-year turnaround is necessarily the most promising thing, especially for something that's supposed to be big in an MMO. And for me, I'm kind of worried because now MMOs to me are just starting to become synonymous with like monetization schemes and games and stuff like that. So I don't know. I'm probably not gonna get my hopes up, as the last time I did that I ended up being disappointed in that in the form of Marvel Avengers. So I'll keep an eye on it from a distance. I'll watch reviews and stuff. If the gameplay actually looks promising to me and it looks decent and it doesn't look like something that I wouldn't hate, then I'll probably go ahead and buy it. But overall, I'm just very excited that Star Wars is getting brought back in a big way. Indiana Jones is getting brought back in a big way. So as long as the games are good, man, they're gonna have my support. It's basically what I was hoping for ever since I was a little kid. I always just wanted awesome Star Wars games. The only thing I'm gonna pray is that they don't fall into the same traps that they did before, where like they would start developing a game, they would announce it would be the coolest thing ever. You see gameplay, be like, oh my god, this is gonna be the best game ever, and then they don't follow through with it. Kind of like what happened with Darth Maul, kind of like what happened with Star Wars. What was it, 2077 or whatever? Or no, that's Cyberpunk. I don't know.
I think you're talking about Star Wars 1313, I believe.
Yeah, Star Wars 1313. Like how Lions in Twitch chat over here said, Lego Star Wars is going to be coming out as well, which is going to be awesome. So all these Star Wars games is going to be phenomenal. I'm definitely looking forward to Battlefront 3. We'll see what ends up happening.
No, yeah, of course. I mean, I share the same sentiment. I really like it's what we've been saying in this podcast. As long as the idea is great and like they actually follow through with it, it could be a good game. There's technically not really a bad idea unless it's poorly done, because a good idea always takes some time and consideration, and it ends up really developing into something that's worthwhile and something enjoyable. So I have high hopes because I know that Ubisoft Massive does a pretty good job. And the thing about the 2-year turnaround, that's actually not how it works. So Ubisoft, the way it works is they start production on something with one of their studios, and then they'll have like managers from the main studio kind of fill in with some of the ideas so that the sub studio can start like building some of the framework. And then once the main studio is done with their main product, they'll jump in and then start backing up on that while the other companies are doing the same thing. So they have like, I think it's like somewhere around like over 20 studios worldwide, and then that's what they do. They'll probably match up like 4 studios from worldwide to just work on one project in the framework while one team works on developing the ideas for it, and then they all, you know, they work together. That's actually why a lot of Ubisoft games, which is actually a topic we're going to talk about in the future, often end up just feeling the same. Like every Ubisoft game since Assassin's Creed has been offering the same types of gameplay activities, where you'll have like a leap of faith or tower or central location thing that'll unlock all the activities surrounding it, and then all the activities will be the same. It'll be either a VIP assassination mission, a random kill all the ads, a grab this item, steal it, or find this collectible. And it's literally always the same activity across every single Ubisoft game, including Ghost Recon, which was never like that, now has something like that. So does what's that other title? Division is like that. Far Cry is like that. Like every single Ubisoft game is pretty much like another iteration on it, even Watch Dogs. So seeing all that's exactly how I think the development for Star Wars, the new Star Wars game, is probably going to be. Like I'm just saying off the top of my head, don't expect to be anything crazy outside of Ubisoft's creational like thing, because they all follow the same philosophy.
Well, even if it's like, let's say, an Assassin's Creed style-esque game or whatever, I'd be more for that than just another games as a service type clone. Honestly, games like Assassin's Creed, really, to me, I don't feel like they've innovated too much within the past framework. That's my personal opinion. If I get a Star Wars game made in that same fashion, I could at least say I haven't played a Star Wars game that's kind of like that. So that's something new and exciting. Granted, I haven't played a Star Wars games as a service either, but that model is just, to me, that's like just the death of video games. Is that what that model is to me? So as long as it's anything else besides that, I'll be happy with it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting situation for both the IP and also the company, because they have to figure out how they're going to do that. Personally, I like Ubisoft and the way they do their worlds. They're pretty good at getting into the detail and the culture and like really filling in the atmosphere, but they normally fall flat when it comes to activities, which is what I was like how you were mentioning, that they haven't really like evolved past like their development or development philosophies. If you look at the Assassin's Creed games today versus the ones that we were playing when we were younger, they're really different experiences. They're drastically different. I mean, the Assassin's Creed games of now are like RPGs. They have like different abilities and this, and different combat mechanics and loot and all this stuff that really changes the experience immensely. Like, it's not really what we remember playing as kids. As a matter of fact, the older Assassin's Creed games had more of like a Spider-Man-ish, Batman-style combat mechanic, where now it's a bit more loose and open-ended, without falling into that combo system trope that they had before. So they have innovated in some things, but the activities always pretty much have always remained the same. It's always assassinate this guy, leap of faith out of that, steal this, or find out, eavesdrop. It's been like the lifeblood of Assassin's Creed. So seeing now this company make like a Star Wars game, it's going to be very challenging, because they always make like one giant map, and rarely do they ever go to other maps, whereas Star Wars is a game about space traveling, and there's different planets with different politics and cultures and aliens. So it's going to be pretty interesting watching them either make a game like Division, where it's just one giant area and one planet, or making a game that is more like Jedi Fallen Order with Division style gameplay, where you go to different planets. It's something that it's a challenge. They have to figure out how they want to create that, and the direction they want to take the game. I find that to be something that put them in a unique situation, not only with fans of Assassin's Creed, fans of Star Wars, but also fans of their own titles.
If they do end up getting inspired off the Division, I think that that is something promising. The Division does offer something promising within its gameplay. I would like for them to expand upon it a little bit more, given the fact that there's so many different weapons available within the Star Wars universe, so many different abilities depending on what race you are, or what if you're a Jedi or a Sith, this and that. So definitely expand upon that, but also I wouldn't want it to come at the cost of like a strong narrative, perhaps a good multiplayer, actual interactability with your environment and the map, and more activities like that. So that's what I typically mean when I say what I was saying. Division gameplay would be fine as long as it's not just that and nothing else, and not just loot and whatever else. I want things that make the game feel more complete, and then if you want to copy anything else, that'll be fine. But no minimal viable products. That's what we go for out here.
No, I 100% agree, and I definitely, but it is an interesting notion to see how they're gonna try and realize this game based off of their philosophies, knowing that there's an expectation already based off of the IP. So it's definitely a challenge that they have. And I can't wait to see if it's. I can't wait. I honestly can't wait. I'm pretty excited to see what ideas they have. If they're gonna do the same thing they always do, where they just show an amazing E3 demo that ends up not being the final product, or if they're gonna actually show something that really is what ends up being the game. Because a lot of times, and I think this is actually going to be a nice segue to the topic today. A lot of these game companies or development companies, they end up creating these E3 spectacular demos, and they end up either being over-promising or just completely fake. Like they're nowhere near what the final product is. And Ubisoft's actually known for that. They do a lot of CGI trailers that really show this game like in a fantastical graphical setting and this whole like almost next gen style of game design, and then when you get the actual game, it's nowhere near the quality that they originally promised. Now granted, they've gotten better at that obviously as technology goes, and they're more able to closely match the CGI that they do their demos on, but there's still a lot of that problem, and it actually has led to a lot of game companies, specifically this year with COVID, like really fall flat on their face. And I know you have your fair share of moments where you really want to go off on these companies, because it really is unfair, especially with Cyberpunk, which is extremely sad. That was just sad. It ruined me. I was like, damn, one of my favorite companies, one of the last few like really respectable companies, they just fell off their horse. They were just like, oh, we're just gonna fall flat on our face and eat our words and eat crow,
Yeah, I was actually gonna say that's actually pretty crazy to me. When you look at every industry, right, outside of like it seems like the video game industry, if you release anything that is remotely unlike, or if you advertise anything that's remotely unlike your product, you're really opening the door to getting just destroyed with a lawsuit for false advertising. So it's really, I don't know, it's very weird to me. It almost feels like surreal or just weird that for some reason, video game companies, like video game developers, like Ubisoft and all these people, like they almost have like free reign to just advertise as falsely as they like, especially with using E3 as a means that they develop these games that aren't even real, or they don't even look anywhere near close to what the actual game looks like, for the sake of making their games look that much better. I think honestly, with the CD Projekt Red having so many eyes on them because of the failure that was Cyberpunk 2077, maybe there's going to be a little bit more legal interaction with video game developers in terms of false advertisement and things of that nature. We'd really have to see what the results of the legal battle against CD Projekt Red. But we've already with stuff like games as a service style games, you've already seen the governments getting involved in trying to regulate that. Video games there's always been a battle of trying to regulate video games, whether it's been for violence or monetization schemes, now maybe for false advertisement. I think that's one of the biggest battles that have to be fought against video game developers right now, is that, because it's just like how you said, almost every developer is pretty much running these demos that end up looking nothing like the games. Like if I think back, some of the biggest disappointments were Watch Dogs, where Watch Dogs ended up being nothing like what was advertised. I'm right now. Division. Oh, the first Division was nothing like what it was advertised. That's what always makes me feel like so sad, especially with these minimal viable products like Division and stuff like that. Is that whenever you see the E3 demo, the game looks like it's gonna have a strong narrative. It looks like you're gonna have like very like cohesive interaction with your teammates and stuff like that, to the point where you're gonna be very dependent. The game looks beautiful. It looks like it's a massive open world. And then when you actually get it on your system, it doesn't look anything like that. It's actually completely like it's completely broken in the sense that the environment isn't populated. There's like a single car throughout like the whole city. The graphics look nowhere near as good as it did in the E3 demo. It's just disappointing, really. And I feel like too many people get away with that. And so I'm hoping that a result of all these legal battles is that'll get put to an end.
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges. I think now there's starting to be more involvement from like the government for really lying to people, and of course there's consumer protection and laws and things that protect consumers, so they're obviously going to act upon situations like this, like specifically. I mean, the Cyberpunk thing has been pretty crazy to me. The fact that Sony literally kicked them off their own platform, was like, hey, fix your stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background that have been developing over stories, rumors and other situations, and talking about that. One of the rumors that have been put out there is that the leaders or leadership management actually promised Microsoft and Sony that day one or the day zero patch, the patch was going to fix the game or whatever, was going to fix it, that they didn't need to go through all the certification, and that they promised the game will be perfect and their reputation stands for it. That's a rumor. I'm not saying it's complete, but it does kind of fit the puzzle piece. It's like how they were able to get past Sony's certification, that they did this promise, like, hey, we're good for it, we promise it's going to be great, and this game's not going to fail when it launches, and their day one patch, as big or as much work as they put into it, did not cover any of the important bugs that was plaguing the game, and because of it, the game felt really flat. It felt really underdeveloped. It really let down a lot of fans that have not only been waiting for this game, but are fans of the company. To me, it's sad. I'm a big Witcher fan. I've loved CD Projekt Red for quite some time. I played their first 2 games on PC. I literally built a whole PC based off of Witcher 2 so I could play it at max graphics. Like, I literally built a whole PC just to play those 2 games, the first 2 games. And then I got Witcher 3 and I played that game like almost in its entirety, not like the platinum, or I haven't done like super hard mode yet, or I think death march, but I played the game throughout its entirety, all the quests, all the expansions, about like over 100 hours in the game, and I was really let down. It's just something that it hurt me physically, but it's just something interesting to know how the companies are doing that.
Well, I was going to say that, one important thing is that, like how you mentioned, there is consumer protection laws, and I'm sure that some people will take advantage of it. But I don't know about you, but I've actually been using Twitter a lot more frequently now, because I think that it's actually it allows you to peer into the minds of the people that use internet that are likely to be gamers and stuff, especially if they're following things like IGN, GameSpot, if they do follow CD Projekt Red or Cyberpunk 2077. And I don't know what it is, man, but there's these brain dead drones out there that no matter what, they won't accept any criticism of CD Projekt Red or Cyberpunk 2077. Like, you go through the comments, man, and it's insane. Like, you don't realize that these people like lied to you, that they took people's money. And yeah, I get it that maybe, the game isn't as broken on PC or whatever if you manage to get it on a next gen console, which, keep in mind, a very small percentage of people actually managed to buy a PS5 and a new Xbox or whatever because of all the scalping and everything that was going on. So on top of the fact that those versions weren't that accessible as they should have been, the majority of people are either going to get it on PC or for their last gen consoles, which was the PS4 and the Xbox One or whatever. And you have people saying it, and like I've seen people in the comments being like, "Bro, you're just jumping on the hater bandwagon, bro. Like you're just hating on them for no reason. Like they lied to us. They said the games were going to be on PS4 and Xbox One. They started development for the game on these consoles 8 years ago, and even if you want to say no, bro, but look, they changed it to be for like PC and next gen towards the end. Then if you know that it's busted and it won't work on the PS4 and the Xbox One, you simply don't sell it. It's that simple. If you tasted your food and you're like, I think I may have accidentally shat in my food, you don't give it to your paying customers so they can eat it. And for all of you who are defending CD Projekt Red through this, you're a cuck.
All right, I guess we're gonna start insulting the entire CD Projekt Red community. I guess let's actually talk about the whole process, because there's actually something interesting. You were talking about how the developers kind of lied and added so much to the game. There's actually an interesting article that actually covers a lot of what we wanted to talk about today, in terms of like how the gaming industry is kind of going through a phase of like crap development in a sense. Jason Schreier, one of the most well-known insiders, his popularity comes from the fact that he is such a good journalist, to the point where he has gotten trust from individuals in these development companies to be able to speak freely about their stresses in the workplace. And every corporate company has stresses. It's known. We worked in Office Depot and we had our fair share of problems where the corporate was just like, hey, do this or we're going to start firing people, this and that. And it always happens. And I believe that's what's going on too, where there's like a sense of like the leadership is starting to separate themselves from the development team and work more closely with the marketing team to try and build hype and get money. And then they're kind of forgetting the whole process of creativity. One thing which I don't understand, because creativity, it is what it is, but the Marvel movies led by Kevin Feige has been one of the most interesting projects known to mankind, because they've literally run across 32 films with all these different heroes and have managed to almost each and every single one of them make $1 billion title, because people are so invested in the entirety of its universe that they can add all these things. But at no moment do they just give up and give us a crap hero or miss out on effort for CGI. They equally put effort into each film, whether it's a single hero movie or an Avengers team up movie, right? So it doesn't make sense to me that these companies are just trying to forget about the creative process and are allowing for all these things to exist. So let's talk about the recent Bloomberg article where they talk about the development process of Cyberpunk. So everybody knows CD Projekt Red is well known for Witcher 3. They're a third-person RPG single-player type of company, right? That's what they would probably start making the game on, right? Considering all things, you don't just jump to FPS one day. You start working by what you know, and then maybe you'll consider the change. That's normal, and it's exactly what happens here. But the way it happens, I find it to be a little disturbing. According to the individuals that spoke out against their NDAs, obviously under anonymity. So the game starts off as Cyberpunk 2077 starts development in around 2012 when it gets announced as a third-person title, right? And it's going to be like a single-player RPG with all these interesting mechanics and story elements that you do see in the game still, with all these different paths of the story, choices that you make that really change the way you might approach a scenario, whether you want to do stealth or maybe you want to argue with somebody, have a discussion, and maybe see if you can convince an NPC to do something else for you and change the way the mission layout works. Although it's in the game, that's the original premise. That's how the game was originally being made. Then somewhere along the way, after they finished Witcher 3, they saw the successes of GTA 5, and they hired they brought a new guy up to the level of game director management with a more corporate-y sense mentality to start leading the game. And his direction was to try and make it into more of like a GTA experience, but in first person. So the game now starts shifting into a first person perspective with new types of mechanics and game design that are not well known to the company. It's not in their strong suit. Then throughout this article, they started explaining how the development was starting to get pretty rough, because as they started shifting focus to Cyberpunk, they were starting to create a new engine to fit in their new ideas that did not fall in line with their previous engine. And even one developer literally described it as trying to run a train on a track that's still being laid down. So they were literally creating the engine as they were making the game at the same time, making it doubly so or extremely difficult for them to really incorporate changes and ideas because the engine wasn't there for them to create it. So they were doing both simultaneously. As time went on, they kept extending the development cycle to try and really pick up the game. And then the managers were like, oh, we don't have to worry about anything. This is the Witcher company. We'll just make it happen. So the similar mentality that you've heard from BioWare and Anthem, which also did the same thing, the BioWare magic. It'll make Anthem work. And then, of course, it failed. But then the Cyberpunk team, the leadership started doing the same thing, right? So time goes on. 2018 comes around. They make an E3 demo that apparently took months to develop and had nothing to do with the actual game. As a matter of fact, one developer was deeply upset that they wasted months of their time to make a demo that has nothing to do with the game when they could have spent more time on the actual game and probably incorporated some of the ideas that were thought of in that E3 demo into the actual game, which didn't make it into the final cut. So they started marketing this game that wasn't at all what they were actually going to deliver. Along the way, they're still developing for the PS4 and the Xbox, trying to make this game work. And as Red Dead comes out, they're seeing, wow, Red Dead's really great, and that's the type of game that we want to make. We want to make this big open world that just becomes like a unique situation where players are just free to create, right? Their own paths. And as time goes on, the game is failing. Like, what's going on with the development? They're still trying to figure out what they want to do. Like, if you're starting to see that your game's not making it, but you're excusing your development for it, like, come on, guys.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, man. Thinking back on what you were telling me, I think, I don't know, it kind of ties into the way that corporations are just kind of naturally designed, because obviously CD Projekt Red isn't an American company. I forget where they're based. They're based in some other country.
Poland.
Yeah, that's right. They're based in Poland, but so it speaks obviously to the fact that this isn't solely like an American company issue, but more maybe just that there's something wrong in the way that corporations just naturally operate. You know, we have marked here that we're going to talk about like overtime and crunch and like workplace abuse and stuff like that. And to me, it's just kind of disturbing, man, because so many countries have laws outlining like, you know, workers' rights and stuff, so that way people don't get abused. You know, typically you're only supposed to work 40 hours a week, at least in the United States. You work 40 hours a week. You know, you get your lunch breaks. You have sick days, et cetera, et cetera. You have vacation days, which, you know, oftentimes you're forced to use and stuff. So when it comes down to it, you know, it's very weird that corporations have the ability to just straight up make you sign a non-disclosure agreement. I don't know. I think that's kind of disturbing, like, because, yeah, a non-disclosure agreement, the original purpose of that, of a non-disclosure agreement is supposed to be that you're not supposed to share, like, trade secrets with someone else that could be a competitor or whatever, and that's understandably so. You know, if, like, let's say you design an iPhone or whatever, and there's some sort of a secret component to it that isn't readily available to the competitors, it would be kind of messed up, especially if you're not the person who came up with the idea. Excuse me. If you came up with the idea, that you just shared it with a competitor, or you made a product to kind of try and compete with that, and the only reason why you have that knowledge is because you worked for them to begin with. Obviously, it makes sense to be able to provide a protection to the corporation in that instance. But now, a non-disclosure agreement where it kind of keeps workers from not only speaking out against maybe abuse that has occurred to them within their workplace, such as overtime and crunch time and stuff, which, you know, ends up making it obviously makes the workers suffer, and then it makes the product suffer, but also it prevents them from whistleblowing on something that's going to be damaging to the consumer. Like, you know, these people were basically forced into signing an agreement that prevented them from warning people, hey, the management's making really messed up decisions. Cyberpunk 2077 is not going to be the game that you guys thought it was. It's all just so disturbing to me when you think about it. What if you're a manager, right, at CD Projekt Red, and you're thinking about obviously the bottom line, making the most money possible, selling Cyberpunk 2077 as early as possible, making a quick buck on it. What do you think is was their main like thought process going into this? They were thinking, because they knew how busted this game was. What they were thinking was, look, so many other companies have gotten away with releasing busted games, including, you know, I mean, Witcher 3 wasn't really busted. It had some pretty bad glitches or whatever, but it wasn't like busted, you know? So they thought, we've gotten away with it before. Just release it. Most places don't even take refunds for games. Like GameStop, it's super difficult. You know, the PlayStation Store doesn't even like look at returns. Xbox doesn't even look at returns. Just sell it. We're gonna make our money, and if people hate us for it afterwards, they'll be fine. But their insult to the senses was so atrocious that literally other corporations such as Sony went as far as removing their game off their store and issuing automatic refunds to people who played it, even if they beat the game. I actually saw some guy on Twitter who shared a screenshot that showed that he beat the game or whatever, and then it also showed the refund from Sony. He was just like, haha, I just finished Sony or whatever, which I thought was kind of funny but kind of messed up, because, you know, have some integrity, you know what I mean? But I digress. Anyway, I find it disturbing that corporations have that amount of power to force their employees to sign an agreement to basically consent into doing something immoral. Not only immoral maybe towards consumers, but even towards themselves, like signing yourself over for crunch time. If the legal definition or if the legality of you working is defined as, you know, you only having a maximum of 40 hours a week or whatever, corporations shouldn't be able to override that. There's actually a lot of people that experience burnout even now just working 40 hours. Some people, there's studies that have been done that show that people are only really productive a lot of the times only for a few hours every day. So these are conversations that we have to evolve to start having about the psychology of human nature and how hard we really are meant to work and stuff. And the fact that corporations have the ability to just go against not only maybe what's basic human nature, but also just current work laws and current like consumer laws, just by being able to make people sign documents, I think is so messed up. Like, I don't know. You can't even, in terms of like murder and stuff, you can't even consent to let someone murder you. Like, if I signed a paper right now that said, you, Jordan G. Marcos, can kill me, Michael C. Moore, and you, like, I signed that paper and you killed me, you would still face legal repercussions for killing me. So how is it that corporation, obviously, like, maybe you could say it's not as great a crime because you're ending like a human life here by committing murder, but how is it that the same standard of law doesn't apply? Because you're still technically doing something that can be considered like criminal or like, you know, dishonest at the very least, and something that does have legal repercussions. How is it that they're able to get away by making that they get away with having people agree to not disclosing this predatory behavior? I don't know. It's something I find deeply disturbing.
Well, let's get into that, because it's funny you mentioned overtime and crunch. That's actually something that did happen in Cyberpunk, despite the fact that they promised wasn't going to happen. They were revered as the big company. Oh, they're so benevolent. They're not going to do overtime and crunch.
They promised a lot of things that didn't happen. They promised the whole game that basically didn't happen. But, you know, I get the point.
Yeah, they were this company that was highly revered as being able to do this. So continuing off from what I was saying, around 2018 when they did the fake E3 demo that was not what they promised, right? The game at this point is struggling because they're developing as they're creating the engine. They spent time creating something that had nothing to do with the actual game, and as they're going along, they're starting to find all these insane bugs that are causing the development to just go haywire, right? And they're continuously chugging, but every minute that they're doing this, they're the tasks become longer, and they start getting an insurmountable amount of tasks to try and overcome these glitches and bugs in time for production. Along the way, the company then decides 2020 is going to be the year. We can't wait any longer. We need to release, and I kind of understand that perspective, that they need to release as much as possible, as soon as possible, because they are not Sony that has like 50 different companies that could just release a game on each year. They are not Ubisoft that releases an Assassin's Creed every 2 years. They are a company that takes 4 to 5 years to plan out their games and release at a slow cadence, right? So they start going on this path, and along the way, while they're discovering all these glitches, the developers, the leaders say, oh, we're not going to do crunch, but hey, if you start spending more hours, right, to develop the game, we'll start giving you tokens tokens that we can then give you back as royalties or time off, this and that, as rewards to really incentivize people to work harder and work overtime, right? And then some of the developers or the development team started to realize that those people that didn't do more than 40 hours were actually promoting the other people that did go overtime to work even more than their supposed overtime. So normally when you work overtime, you work 4 to 6 hours more. You generally get 50 hours in, and that's like a healthy amount of overtime. Really isn't healthy, but 50 hours I would say is like the max you can go before you start burning out. But those people that were doing 50 were then doing 60 because they were picking up the hours that were supposed to be picked up by the people that were supposed to be encouraged to do more than 40 hours. So that's how the leaders were starting to promote that, while they were forcing the team to start making the game faster to try and get it out by 2020, despite the fact that the development team was constantly pining for a 2022 release because they knew that the game was not going to be ready until 2022. It was too much work. What they were trying to do was impossible. And they continuously pushed for a Rockstar type of game. They wanted to reach for the skies and make the next GTA. But the honest answer is that you can't just mimic 1,000+ crew team with different offices when you're just a one group of 700 people. The size is in there, the manpower is in there. So how do you do that? Continuing forward, they came into 2019 and they set the date, March or April 2020. Along the way, they start realizing that they can't fit the whole game, so they start cutting off all these different ideas that they wanted to incorporate. There was supposedly a whole underground that was built in the game, has been cut off. Developers are starting to get tired. They're starting to quit. We start seeing people kind of slowly dip away from the game, and the development team's going through hell. And then they start hiring a bunch of expats, people from different countries that have no idea how to speak their language. So then there starts being language barriers, cultural barriers, work issue barriers.
Don't forget COVID.
Oh yeah, and then COVID hits in 2020, and then development really slows down. Then comes the true hell of development. They have to scramble to figure out how they want to do it. They're continuously taking out ideas, and then they start incorporating ideas like a police force, where they all of a sudden they added a whole police system that makes no sense in the game because it's completely unfinished, and that's why people are hating it so much. But then we end up with developers who are abused, leadership that doesn't know what they're doing, marketing team that is marketing a game that literally at one point they marketed the game as coming out in September, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the game didn't come out the day we said. It got pushed back, and they didn't know what to do because you could clearly see that the whole team, there's no communication. They're trying to push back to this last minute, going off so far as to promise the big boy companies that this game's going to be ready for shipping, and then it's not. And then all these things happen. Fast forward to January, one of the leaders at the company makes a 5-minute apology saying, please do not blame the development team. It is not their fault. Blame us, leadership, because we made that call to release the game when we shouldn't have. We should have more closely, worked more closely in line with our development team and followed a better pipeline for the development. I agree that's what should have been done. But now that they have to eat crow, face the facts, face the music, and start picking up their reputation again because they went down the shitter. But this has been going on everywhere. Marvel Avengers did the same thing. They did this big promise as soon as COVID hit. Hey, we're communicating through Zoom. We're going to bring this game to life, and we're going to deliver the most amazing thing. What do we end up with? A grindy game with a somewhat okay story that ended up just being a repetitive mess for games as a service. But this has been going on since before. BioWare did the same thing. Oh, BioWare Magic. All the developers started getting stressed. They started quitting. They started working 60-hour things. Apparently, there was like 4 different remakes of Anthem. Went through 4 different reworks before it finally released. And it's all because the CEO did not want to let the game go. They wanted to keep pushing it through their engine, which is not a good engine for open world games. So, there's a lot of things I'm unpacking right now. I'm already going off into some weird territory. But going back to the Cyberpunk thing, there's a lot of things going on in the industry where developers are really getting abused, both sexually and physically. Yeah, there's sexual abuse. We're going to talk about that too with Ubisoft in a bit. But there's a lot of these things with working overtime and all these bugs and frustration. And you can see it in Cyberpunk. There's literally a video. If you see the Angry Joe's review, there's literally a section in his review where he literally records a section where a guy turns his camera slightly to the left or moves slightly to the left, and all of a sudden the whole game world disappears. And that's because the way that they do it they build these bigger games for older consoles by streaming the loading to you, so they have to develop it at each and every single angle, because when you turn the camera, the game loads and unloads. So imagine all these problems going on, plus having to program that. These are challenges that they have to face every day as developers. And we got a mess. We got mess. And it makes me sad, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously you're speaking of like more like physical things like bugs and stuff of that nature when it comes to Anthem. But a big problem with Anthem 2 was also the games as a service model they tried to employ. I haven't really gone as far as to learn, if there was abuse and stuff in the case of Anthem towards the workers, because I kind of had a funny feeling that Anthem was going to be a shitty game to begin with. Like, it looked kind of cool. Then I got the feeling that it was going to be a Destiny clone. And I was like, it's not going to be for me. So just let it go. But I did hear about, they did take that same minimum viable product mentality as well. So on top of the fact that the game's like compounded with all these different bugs and issues that it has with the world's not loading right and different bugs happening and having brain dead AI and having nothing in the game, I actually saw a video talking a little bit more about games as a service and stuff, and it actually spoke on Anthem. And what happened with Anthem was that they had very decently, like, it actually had a decent product going on and everything. Like, the development team was actually pretty passionate towards it, and they were implementing some cool ideas for the game that was actually going to make it solid. But the practice of most games as a service, what they end up doing is that they actually end up bringing these teams on. I forgot they're called. I think they're closers or something like that. That essentially what they're responsible for doing is taking the infant version of the game away from the warmth of their mother developers, from their parents, and then they go ahead and they begin amputating all the content right off of it, and for the purposes of reselling it down the line as DLC, which is why, again, I'm fervently against games as a service model. You're always like, oh, but it's great, you get extra content for $30. That stuff that's supposed to be in the game to begin with, they're just selling it to you at a higher price tag. So it's not extra content for cheap. It's the same content you should have gotten for $60, now priced at $90, $120, $160, $190, and so on and so forth. So that's another practice that I think is actually really disturbing within the current game industry. Is so many games like Fallout 76, was it, or 70?
Yeah, Fallout 76 is another massive failure.
Yeah, so games like Fallout 76, Destiny, Anthem, all these games, they're literally having a passionate, wonderful idea for their games. It's being made, and then the big suits that these corporations are getting these teams in that don't care anything about the game whatsoever. They only care about sucking as much money out of the consumer as possible. They're stripping the game of everything that makes it good to begin with, and then they're trying to resell it. They're trying to resell it to the people at a more inflated price. That's a practice that honestly also has the video game industry in shambles, and it has to be dealt with. Coupled with the false advertisement and the abuse that's going on with the workers. Now, in terms of like, what was that you were saying about sexual abuse? Because I know that personally, I think I've heard I'm frozen. Rip. My thing is having a heart attack.
I just noticed you've been frozen for like 10, 15 minutes. Hey, Emerald, thank you for joining up today. Joining us today. Just so you know, we're talking about like how the game industry is going through like a serious fluctuation of different development philosophies, and like how some of them are getting pretty abused. I don't know if you want to add your fair share of opinions with that, but we were just talking about how Cyberpunk, they just discovered through an interview that there was a lot of development issues where the game was suffering from bugs and the developers didn't care, or the leaders didn't care, and they kept pushing for this idea or this grand image of a perfect title that never came to be fully realized. And Mike was just talking about now the fact that he actually learned about Anthem, which, by the way, there's a lot more to it than Anthem. There's, like I said, there's 5 reworks, and between believing in BioWare magic and using I personally think it's a crappy engine. EA swears by it, but the DICE engine, I think it's called the DICE engine, that they use for Battlefield, they started trying to use it for every single game in EA's like library, and that engine is not made for Anthem. Like, it is not made to sustain an open world, and it doesn't have the features needed for it. That was one of the massive challenges that they had with that game, and why they had to do so many reworks and add all these loading screens and try and make it more like mission based rather than the open exploration that they had. So there was a lot of things going on with that, and along the way, the CEO, forget his name, but the CEO was literally trying to push that engine down their throats. He was like, "Make the game on the engine. I want the engine." Right? That's a problem because the engine isn't made for the game, but you're forcing these developers to work against their will, knowing while they're trying to tell you with feedback, "Hey guys, we're trying to make a game that's good for us to make monies. That's what you want. Why are you going to force us to work like with one arm tied behind our back? It just doesn't make sense." And then they started working overtime. People started getting stressed. They had to hire psychologists on site for the development cycle. And then what happened? The game bombed when it came out, and now they're supposedly making a rework of Anthem 2.0, and we don't know what's going on. But now let's get into the sexual misconduct that's been going on in the industry, specifically in Ubisoft. So during the summer, a lot of female employees have actually come out to explain that there's a strongly driven male-dominated work environment within Ubisoft offices. And it all comes down that it comes down from, I believe, the CCO, the Chief Creative Officer that used to be there, Herbert Escobar or something like that. We have to search up his name later. The guy was like extremely aggressive in his manners towards women, and it was like really like abusive. Like he would make a lot of sexual comments, and it was like, I guess like upset when they wouldn't reply kindly to his comments. So much so, but so much so that it influenced development. So a lot of the games, especially Assassin's Creed, supposedly they've been trying to make a female antagonist for years, but he always felt that no one would play Assassin's Creed if it was a female-led character. So he would always force a male character, and then after fighting for it for years, the developers are finally able to get Alexios and Alexandra, the two characters, brothers or twins or whatever in Assassin's Creed Odyssey to be a thing. And the only reason there were two characters is because the creators wanted to make Alexandra, which is why her voice actress was so great, and they didn't want to make the male character, which is why his character falls so flat in the voice acting, because they didn't really care about that. They were more interested in the other one. But he kept forcing it, like, no, you have to have a male character. It cannot be a female-only character. And he was really aggressive to avoid females in his games for no apparent reason other than he was just, I guess, upset because women didn't take kindly to him, or he was just, I don't know, he was misogynist for some reason. But it actually went so far deeper as to many developers, like lead managers, were actually abusing their power and saying, "Oh, I'm so great, and I'll give you this raise and this and that if you do this for me sexually." They were making like sexual comments. And one well-known developer in the Ubisoft company was actually the guy who led Black Flag, the guy who I think led Odyssey and was now leading the newest game, Valhalla. The guy with his family betrayed his wife, abusing his power by getting with I think Twitch socialites to try and send them nude pictures or something. And he also did that for some of the employees in his own workplace. That was a massive problem with that abuse going on in Ubisoft, that they had to literally let go of some really high-end managers or high-position managers because of that sexual abuse. So on top of workplace abuse being driven to the ground like a slave, working overtime, there's also sexual abuse going on in the industry, with many different developers having moments where women are extremely frowned upon in the workplace. And this is all affecting development, because these women are obviously discouraged. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to defend themselves. They don't want to come into work. So they're not putting in their best foot forward every day because they're afraid to be in the workplace. And that, again, affects the development cycle. All Ubisoft games come out with glitches, and half of their workforce, or a good portion of the workforce, is women. So if half your team doesn't want to come into work, obviously your game's going to come out like crap every time, or it's going to have a lot of bugs. This is a problem. Like, we can't be having this in the industry, because it's hurting game development. Every game that comes out always has a problem. Either they get abused by overtime, or they get abused by sexual abuse. And every time that those words are said, the game always comes out like crap. You can even hear it. I'm not going to say anything. I don't think Last of Us Part 2 is a crap, but there's a lot of words about overtime and crunch and a lot of reworks that happen in the game, and a lot of people really feel like the story doesn't make sense. Give me your opinion on that, because I'm already like, I'm going to just keep going on about how much I hate this.
Well, I do agree with you in the sense that, you know, these abuses such as like the forced overtime, crunch time, all that sexual abuse has to be stopped. I do feel like it's not something that's unique to the gaming industry. Honestly, I feel like that's something that's actually, you know, it's unfortunately widespread in any industry that you might work in, especially if you have, you know, members of the different sexes working together and things of that nature. Not to say that's not possible between the same sexes and whatever, but obviously, you know, it might be a little bit more common in those cases. It does need to be stopped. Now, the question is, how is it that we can actually, you know, get there? Probably holding people accountable. Holding the people who commit these actions accountable to begin with is probably a good step. You know, people have to step forward when these things happen. They have to.
Sorry guys, I completely butchered the guy's name and probably called out somebody that does not deserve any hate. I apologize about that. The gentleman in question that was the one, you know, caught for the sexual abuse in the Valhalla team was actually Ashraf Ismail, which was the lead gameplay designer, and I think he was also like the lead game director.
We have to start taking steps to try to correct all these bad behaviors that are going on in all the industries, but also, you know, the gaming industry as well, since we're primarily focused on that. And like Jordan said, it really does translate to only harming not only obviously the workers, but even the consumers afterwards, with the games oftentimes coming out worse since it affects the development cycle. I don't know, man. I think we honestly need to start seeing legal action starting getting involved in all this to see what sort of corrections we can come up with to make this stuff better, because, you know, honestly, I don't know. There's something going awry, and we need to get it fixed.
No, of course, and as you were mentioning, now you were actually having a point that you were bringing across about government, the government being more involved in the practices going on in the video game industry. So share with me some of those ideas, because I thought they were kind of cool.
Well, yeah. So you know, obviously, whenever there's legislation, a lot of the times it ends up having actions that weren't intended when passing around. There tends to be a lot of loopholes that people take advantage of or whatever. So I'm obviously not a politician. I haven't studied politics, or I haven't really studied like legal matters all that much. When I first went to college, I did like first start studying like criminology a little bit, and that did require learning some laws and stuff. But like, just as a generic idea, some of the things that they could start doing is honestly start fining or like punishing, like have some sort of a punitive measure in place towards game developers when they start doing like fake trailers, like for E3 and stuff. Like, they should just make the rule like, hey, you're only allowed to showcase whatever the game's actually going to look like. You know, we get it that you want your game to look super pretty so that you can sell it or whatever, but honestly, if that's not what the product is, and that's not what you're going to be selling, just like in other, like, you know, whatever other industry, you're not allowed to do that then. You know, as far as crunch and overtime, hey, look, overtime, it needs to be rewarded this much, etc., etc. But then they need to get these rewards in place. Like, maybe they have to follow it up with immediate time off, and that's paid, or there needs to be some sort of other solution to there needs to be they need to regulate the overtime and the crunch. They need to lay out these very specific guidelines for how they can do it. You know, if the people want to back out of it at any time, they can. There needs to be like a contract, something in writing to keep track of this. They need to get properly rewarded for it. They need to get forced time off afterwards. You know, something just to handle that. And then the sexual abuse is where it starts to get a little bit more tricky, because, you know, obviously it's wrong. Basically, the only thing that I think can happen there is that the people need to talk about it. Like, hey, it happens. Bring it up. Try to record it if you can. Get witnesses and bring it up immediately. There's already a legal system in place, thankfully, for you know, dealing with those consequences. But definitely, it needs to be encouraged that these people document it when something like this happens to them, and they step forward as soon as they can to take action against it. It's true that, like, obviously it's a little bit hard to want to take action against someone who's your superior in your workplace and everything like that. But I think that the consequences of being abused will always surpass that of trying to take action against those who are your abusers. And ultimately, it's only the right thing to do, not only because you're helping yourself, but because you might be helping everyone else who might be going through the same thing, you know? So we got to use the legal system you got to leverage the legal system in your favor for that, because thankfully sexual abuse is already illegal. We just have to, once it happens, we got to step forward and actually try to utilize it to protect yourself and others against people who would abuse people like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, these guys, specifically this gentleman, Ashraf, he's probably going to be hated for a long time, and he's probably going to have a lot of difficulty finding a job. I mean, at one point or another, like I always, whenever I see people like really ranking on somebody in there, I always think about, like, you know, at what point do we stop the hatred and we start to forgive, to kind of let go of those bad emotions and try and be happy. But it's just unfortunate that he's tagged him, so he's gonna be unfortunately tagged like that for the rest of his life. I guess, like, just don't do it right off the bat. Like, just don't do it, because you're gonna ruin. Yeah, if you're gonna eventually get caught, and you're gonna ruin your own life. Aside from that, yeah, development has been pretty rough, and regardless of what action is committed, whether sexual or physical, the game always ends up suffering for it, right? So now I'm gonna ask you this, because I personally feel this way, and I'm gonna explain what I feel now. Because I know this, I don't buy games day one. I always wait till there's a couple patches, and I start getting I read the reviews to see how the games are, but I actually start reading more about, like, in Reddit communities and Twitter and all that stuff. Now Twitter, I started using it, but mostly Reddit and Metacritic, to see how users are perceiving the game over time, specifically YouTubers, to see if the updates fix any of the problems that initially launched with the game. Because especially I do this with Assassin's Creed, because I know every time anybody gets Assassin's Creed day one, they always have like 1,000 problems, and it's normally takes them like a year to fully make the game like completely playable, no problems, like you can enjoy it now. So how do you feel about that? Do you think you share my sentiment? Do you think we should start trying to, you know, buy later? And even as YouTubers, who cares about making content day one with the game day one? Because our wallets and consoles are suffering for all the crashes.
Well, I was gonna say, thankfully, we have a lot of honest people in the reviewing industry, such as Angry Joe, and such as this gentleman we always like to watch. The Act Man. That buy the games. Obviously, they're not like a lot of these people that have like the pre-release content, like maybe the Rad Brad, because they're understandably, they probably have a good relationship with the people, and then that's why they're given the games early as part of like the advertising. I'm sure that if they ever said something bad about the game, that would actually go into affecting whether or not they could even secure like a review version of the game in the future. But I think what you're saying is right. I think it's in the best interest of consumers to not buy day one, stop pre-ordering, wait until an honest person, someone who you could trust, reviews the game, and then go from there. Because, if the legal system isn't going to be on our side, where game developers who are putting in play these predatory practices, they're not going to get punished for it, then ultimately we have to vote with our wallets and be the punishment to developers, to let them understand that we're not going to tolerate these practices, and we're not going to tolerate these bad products being released anymore. The only thing with that, though, is that my concern with it is that I have that understanding to myself of, if I see a game is bad, I'm not going to support it. And I've dropped the ball a couple of times in not ordering a game early, when I should have waited, like in Marvel's Avengers. But my thing with voting with your wallet is that, I don't know, man. Like, if we could all get on the same page and just be like, this game is bad, and we're not going to support it. And obviously, that's something that's subjective. But at a certain point, it's like, don't you realize that this game isn't actually that good? Like I said, man, I just don't get how there's people out here who sit by and defend CD Projekt Red with how the game is, or when Cyberpunk 2077 first started having issues, I remember I was on Twitter and I came across someone who said, yeah, that's right, Marvel Avengers is better. It's like, no, it's not. Shut the fuck up. The game died like 1 week in, my guy. Like, your game is just as bad, or not even worse. Like, and there's people who still want to support and like defend these games and buy stuff for the game to give them more financial life. It's like, you don't realize this is a ripoff. They don't care. They did a bad job. Like, why are you still trying to like support it financially? Like, that's my big thing with just leaving it up to the consumers buying it later. I think at some point it is in the best interest of everybody for companies to step in, or for the legal system to step in and be like, okay, you have to advertise what you're actually going to give. If the product isn't functional, you can't sell it. And obviously don't abuse your workers. Like, we need that to happen. I think you can't just leave it in the pocket of, in the hands of consumers, because, well, I mean, to be honest, I think maybe Cyberpunk 2077 is going to have its a hard time financially, even though it's been doing good or whatever. The refunds are probably going to hurt it. The stock price falling is going to hurt it. The lawsuit's going to hurt it. But I don't know if I can say the same to Marvel's Avengers. I think maybe they garnered enough hype where they were able to make a buck off it. You're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it ended up making a profit or not. No, it didn't. Okay, thank God it didn't end up making a profit. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like the big thing with that is that it's too risky leaving it in the hands of consumers. I want the legal system to start stepping in and doing something about it, so we don't even have to wait for it, or that they don't even make a single cent off of stuff that they're not supposed to be doing to begin with.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. And that's actually something that I find pretty interesting, which I want to get to. But just to cover that, yeah, Marvel's Avengers did not make profit. They were about 2 million copies short of making profit. And Cyberpunk's stock did drop, but after the manager or the leader, one of the leaders that did the apology video, when they did that, their stock actually started rising up again 6%. So there's still hope for the company. They just have to prioritize fixing the game in their pipeline first, and that's what they're doing. They're going to fix the game first before they think about DLC. They haven't even announced expansions. They're like, we don't want to talk about that. The only things we want you guys to know is that DLCs will come after the game is fixed, and we are going to provide an next-gen update towards the end of the year. That was it. That was like their comment. It's like, right now, we're just going to fix the game and just stop because we went too far. We bit more than we can chew. So I'm glad that they're doing that, and they're starting to really act upon what they did. They should never have lied to us and hidden, the fact that that old gen was going to be broken from us, but they learn from their mistakes now, it seems, and we're going to see how they go. I always say every company gets one. This is just CD Projekt Red's one, and that's their one. That's it. Now they have to pick up, close down on their philosophies, and then start moving forward with their lives, right? So, but that's like, now here's the thing, right? You're saying vote with your wallet. A lot of these gamers, especially fans of Marvel Avengers, which supposedly there's fans, but when you look at the player base, it's non-existent. No one's playing daily, so I don't know what they're protecting or who's the one championing this. But my point is, should they be buying these skins and stuff because they enjoy it? I mean, like, what right do we have to tell them to stop enjoying a game, whether it's crap or not?
Well, thankfully, we live in a country that, we don't have the right to tell them to stop doing that. However, what I will say, though, is, what I would tell, we don't have the right to tell them to stop, right? But objectively, you can make a pretty good case to show that Marvel Avengers is not the best game it could have been, and that it's overall a pretty bad game, period. What I would tell the people who support this pig slop that's being called video games, that are being called games, just because you enjoy the characters or whatever, because you kind of like the gameplay or whatever, is that not only are you, maybe you are enjoying it, whatever, but I think you're wasting your money on something you shouldn't be. You could be using it to something better, putting it towards a better game or whatever. And then the other thing that they're doing is also you're preventing a better version of that game from being developed. If you tell a developer this is good enough and you put your money towards it and you support it, they have no incentive or no reason to ever make a better product in the future. Like, for me, sorry to go back to this thing, because I feel like we always go back to the same conversation a lot of times when we have these talks. But I was a big Bungie fan, so I'll go back to it. For me, the biggest reason why I didn't buy Destiny 2 right off the bat was because I wasn't a big fan of what happened with Destiny 1. So why in the world would I want to go and support Destiny 2? I didn't buy Destiny 2, at least not right off the bat. That's voting with your wallet. Now whether or not they made the first games, the games enjoyable after that or not, maybe. But again, if I would have just poured my money into Destiny, I would have been telling them, please continue to do this, And ultimately, they made Destiny 2. So that's what ended up happening. But I digress. My point is, if you support that version of Marvel's Avengers, you're telling the developers, make this again, please. Make more of this. I feel like they should have done better than that. I don't want to support that. That's just my take on that.
No, yeah, that's pretty fair. And now another thing too is I wanted to speak on the limitations and skill sets of developers, right? Because a lot of these games, the way they end up failing is that they overpromise and underdeliver in every way possible. That word is defined. It is like the Anthem was promising this big, like, going under the water and discovering this grand open forest and all these different systems coming around, and then the game ends up releasing with basically loading screen simulator, where the entire game is half of the game is you loading between screens and the other half is you doing specific missions. You basically almost never explore the world. It's completely unnecessary from what I've heard from friends. Like, you basically don't even need to explore the world. You just go through the missions and that's like your whole game, right? So with that being said, and knowing the limitations, because I wanted to go back to the thing where you said, "Oh, game service is bad because they just chop up the game and they release it as expansions." That we know that already, especially with games like Anthem. But now, in a specific case like Destiny, right? Destiny 2 did technically release as a full game. There was a full campaign. It was about 8 to 10 hours long. It had some endgame activities. It had a full PvP system. And all these mechanics to go along with it. So it was technically a full game, and it had side quests and exploration in the open world. So afterwards, they made all these expansions, and expansions like Forsaken that are generally big. And instead of bringing 4 planets, it brought 2 locations, a sizable campaign, or about 7 or 8 missions, about like 4 to 5 hours in length, and then several activities came out, right? So, but then as soon as they lost their support from Activision, they brought out Beyond Light at the same price, $40, but only one. Well, they technically brought 2 locations, but one's for the free-to-play player, and the other and it's technically half of what its full size is. And they brought one big, sizable location that is almost the same size as 2 locations from Forsaken, right? But the price is the same, and the campaign's the same, but it didn't have the same amount of content that it did. So now, at what point do we accept pricing for a certain size of game and accept the limitation that developers able to do within their development cycle, whether it's a year or 3 years, or do we just always say, hey, you need to make a bigger game every time?
The answer to that is simple. Game development is part science and it's part art. If a developer has in mind that this game will look like this is how the game should be, it should never come up as a practice to strip those parts away from a game to then later be sold. Make a great game first, make DLC later. Your thought should never be in what can we do to make DLC for this game when the game is still in development. Your thought should always be, what can we do to make this a great game first? Then afterwards, you can ask yourself, okay, we made a great game, great, people love it, they're buying it, this and that. Now, what can we add to make it even better? If you started stripping things from your game, or you didn't include everything that was planned in your game from the get-go, from day one, and you're then saying, we'll do a DLC, in my eyes, as a developer, you already failed. That's just my opinion.
Right. But what I wanted to get at is about the amount of content within a game versus price, right? So Call of Duty releases every year. If you compare Destiny to COD, it almost always has the same amount of content, give or take different activities. So Call of Duty always has one sizable campaign, usually between 4 to 8 hours, right? Destiny always has like a 4 to 8 hour campaign. Then you have in Call of Duty, you have Spec Ops or Zombies, or maybe even both sometimes, that are updated with maps over time, but usually they normally start off with maybe 4 Modern Warfare start off with 4 Spec Ops missions or 6 Spec Ops missions, and then they start adding to it. And Zombies usually launches with one giant map, right? And then you have the multiplayer where you have various modes, and you have various maps, like about 10 or 12. And then you have upwards of 20 weapons released, right? Destiny, on the other hand, has a bunch of side quests that are generally just run here and kill this. Has a few unique weapons, but it normally carries about 15 to 30 new weapons, depending. This expansion was a little small. It only had I think 15 or 20 weapons. and then you have maybe like a couple new strikes, which would be like the side content and a new raid. All of that, those two things in a raid would be the equivalent of spec ops and all that. So at which point do we value and say, dang, Destiny's expansion is very small for what it brings, and I don't think $40 is worth it. But we always forgive Call of Duty for being priced at $60 or $70 this time around for all the content it brings, especially with Black Ops Cold War not bringing the amount that Modern Warfare did.
No, I'm in complete agreement with you. The thing with Call of Duty is that in making games that are so similar to one another, a lot of times it's very easy to see where it falls flat in terms of if they didn't innovate enough, for it to be justified as a new game. So I'm right there with you. Like Modern Warfare, for what it was, it really was a breath of fresh air for the Call of Duty series, and I think that's honestly now considered the best Call of Duty of all time, and did enough where I think it merits that. The problem with Destiny isn't necessarily in the value that it brings with the expansions. It's based off Bungie's own words for what the game was supposed to be. It felt short of ever becoming that. Like, the whole thing about Bungie, correct me if I'm wrong, about Destiny, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember when it was first being advertised all the way back when, was that it was supposed to be this great space adventure where you were like a protector of the light, and you were going to do this with your friends, and it was going to be great, and you're going to fight these big epic battles and all that. And obviously that merits the setup of like a strong universe with good lore and a strong campaign and stuff like that, much like how Halo did so and whatever. Like, for a game that's older and all that and everything, the Bungie Halos did manage to give you that feeling of being a protector and all that, although albeit not really as much having a teamwork sense, sort of like what Destiny focuses on. In the fact that, so many things were stripped from Destiny to just make it what it was in its original release state, it kind of permanently set the tone for the series in a way that I don't think it ever lived up to its original promise of what it was. Like, I don't know if you ever saw the original trailers for Destiny, but a bunch of stuff was cut out that never made it into the game, and it's like, why? Like, for the purpose of, I know they had their share of development issues. Was it for development issues? Was it just so it could be repackaged as DLC? I know a lot of the stuff that was supposed to be originally part of the game was then later added on as DLC. I think that's kind of cheap, like, yeah, you don't want to force developers to just make infinite sized games in terms of like, you get content, but there's reasonable ways that you can find a way to do it. To bring up Smash Ultimate, for example, if you've been making this fighting game, and you've had like 4 iterations of it, how do you manage to give the best value to your players? A very simple one, which I always push for when it comes to other fighting games. Include the roster that's been available for all of them. I don't know why some games go, oh yeah, we'll have these characters, and then we'll drop these characters, and then we'll add these characters. If you're building, always make new characters and have the ones you had before, unless they were broken or all of a sudden something happened where you really didn't want them anymore. But there's no reason for you to drop, if you've had a total of 100 different characters across your total series, why are you going to maintain your roster size at 20 or 30 just because you always constantly want new characters? You know what I mean? Like, if you're the same game series, keep the same amount of characters. So build upon what you already have. And then consider making different game modes and maybe consider adding a strong narrative and stuff like that. Those are the things that end up making feel a game like a lot more whole than what it was. So an example for that from Destiny would be, instead of like giving you something that's like nothing and then just slowly building upon it, I'm arguing that you need to give something already good and then build upon it as you want. And then from Destiny 1 to Destiny 2, I think Destiny 2's original release date, even though it had like a better campaign and stuff, was technically almost kind of worse than Destiny 1's, because they had the opportunity to take everything from Destiny 1 with it to Destiny 2 and then build upon it, and I don't think that happened. It was kind of just like a reset, and it just got rid of all the old things, which I know that was a big grievance that the Destiny community had with Destiny 2, was that it just spat in the face of Destiny 1. Hey, forget this ever happened. Moving on with this, I don't think there's ever an excuse for a developer to not build upon their games. And just, it should never be about trying to find the least amount of work they can do to get the most amount of money from us. If you're that's the battle you're in, you've lost. That's a battle you're gonna lose in my eyes 10 out of 10 times.
No, I could totally understand it, but going quickly off on the comments you made, you're saying like something about fighting games where it's like they always remake a new game with 20 or 30 characters in a roster, and then they drop new characters they may have added in a previous iteration. I mean, that's generally what games of service is supposed to fight against. Let's say if Smash was made as a live service and they had everything they did at start, the way you said, a good game. And that's what they're doing now. Instead of making the next Smash game, they're just adding more and more to the same roster because they already have something good. They don't have to recreate something. When you create a new game versus a live service game, you usually have to retool the engine, improve textures and graphics to make it, reasonable as to why you're making a new game. And then along the way, you start missing out on what may have made that first title good while you're making this new game. Thus, you get situations where you have new mechanics like the handicap thing you said you disliked about the newer Smash games that really bring down the ceiling from pro players to be more in line with the unskilled players, right? If Smash was like games of service, the Smash Melee, which would have been their best iteration, would have probably had over 100 characters by now, and it would have been completely updated and all that, and probably had like a texture pack or update or two. Right, the same way that World of Warcraft has. That's why I say that game of service is good when done under those circumstances. The reason why it sucks is because it's always made how you say it comes out in an unfinished, completely poor fashion, and then it just goes along. It just goes the wrong way.
Well, we've had this conversation about 1,000 times. The idea of games as a service is attractive. The problem is that people, because of what we're talking about now, the game industry being in such a poor state, where it's more about just hitting your bottom line than actually delivering a good product to your consumers, is that games as a service enables people to just try to monetize the game via DLC, not even making a good product, and you end up getting these games. However, I'm gonna here's the thing. So if you think about like DLC and whatever for Melee, yeah, Melee is a better game competitively, and maybe we should consider going back to the format that it had in terms of competition, gameplay-wise, yeah, but what about all the additional things that Ultimate brought on board that you couldn't do it as DLC or if Melee was a games as a service, like the map builder, you have World of Light, you have, there are new mechanics that have been added since Melee. Maybe some people would actually be in favor of the buffer system, or in terms of some sort of buffer system, because there's a lot of, maybe if you're a new player, you don't necessarily like the, having to do the input so precise, but that's a little bit more subjective. Maybe you want the team, like the modes that aren't available in Melee, such as the team battle that lets you have a different character for every stock that you have and things of that nature that you wouldn't have been able to get into Melee as DLC if it was a games as a service type game. I think that making a new game is justified as long as you have some semblance. If we're talking about a sequel, of course. Or if you're a company that's known for making a good game of a certain fashion, and if you're going to make another one of those, you should try to incorporate some sort of, a little bit of the formula that gave you some success to begin with, and then just build upon it. Don't discard. If you discard, it's not good. And also, I think it's a little bit weird, or it's kind of like I don't know if it's an oxymoron, or if it's not, I wouldn't say hypocritical, but you bring up that games as a service would be an answer to this. But funnily enough, games as a service wasn't the answer to this in the case of Destiny. Destiny 2 got made, which is, they were both games as a service, Destiny 1, Destiny 2, and then Destiny 1 got left in the dust. I don't think it's the answer to it. I think it's, I don't know. I think what it is that the gaming industry just needs to get whipped into shape on every front. On every front. I think consumers need to start being more strict with their dollars. My homies out there on Twitter are defending Cyberpunk 2077, get a life. Go find a partner or something, get a job maybe. Just stop. It's not good. All jokes aside, I'm serious. I love you guys, but stop, defending bad practices. It's not good for anybody. Legal action needs to start being taken against people who are physically abusive, sexually abusive. I hope that workers turn down crunch time and overtime as much as they can, especially if it's unpaid. They should definitely not be doing it paid, but I can speak from experience as someone who's worked 70-hour weeks before. No amount of money is ever going to be worth your health. you know, and your work is not going to be good. I remember I would fall asleep at meetings, sometimes working 70-hour weeks. So let's get rid of that and take some sort of collective action against it. It's the only way they're going to learn, you know? It's the only way they're going to learn. I mean, I try to do it as much as I can, like not supporting games that I don't think are good, but ultimately, like, am I really going to be able to do all that much by myself, especially when there are people who are willing to defend these games? Maybe not, but I'm just hoping that people are going to wake up to the issues at hand, I guess.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's a really difficult position to speak on because I think we were having this conversation before the podcast started, where it's like you have a great game, a bad game, and then a really enjoyable game, right? And sometimes a bad game can be extremely enjoyable, and sometimes a good game can be really enjoyable. And what do I mean by that? I mean situations where Destiny may not be at the same tier that Halo 3 was back in its time, but Destiny is far more played and enjoyed by a wider group of players than Halo is. And you have to ask yourself, is the game truly, can you really call it a bad game if so many people are enjoying it? I mean, there's a lot of great mechanics, there's great music, there's great art, but at the same time, you're right, it did fall short of what it was. As a matter of fact, you know, since this is talking about like how the industry has changed, it was a far cry from what they originally promised. I could still remember the first E3 demo that they started showing off behind the scenes, where David Deej, the original community manager for Destiny, was showing off the gameplay in the Cosmodrome, where you supposedly first start the game, where the intro is now. Originally, that was actually supposed to be just like a new area that you go to. And he goes like, he turns around and he sees this open area behind the starting point. He's like, hey guys, as soon as the game comes out, you're going to be able to walk all over that, and you're going to explore that, and there's going to be crazy stuff to explore. And you turn around and continue the mission, and then, you know, like a ship comes over and a friend drops, and over time, the development changed. They found that was like unrealistic. It was too difficult to program a ship coming in and dropping off and analyze, so they just made it like a drop-in, drop-out co-op without the ship animation. It was just, the player would just pop in. And then they dropped the graphics, the size of the world got smaller, they incorporated it into sizable chunks, and they completely changed the experience that they were originally going for, that was originally being promised. So this is known, but again, like, because of that downsize, can you really call Destiny, despite the fact that it's game service or whatever you want to call it, a bad game? Can you really call it a bad game? Because I mean, I've enjoyed it for various hours. Now I know I've gotten bored of it, but then again, I've been playing for 7 years, so I don't know.
Well, like you said, we were having this conversation before the podcast. You told me when you play Destiny, typically you're watching TV while doing it. I think if a medium is not able to completely engulf you and your senses, it's doing a poor job of doing that. And it sounds like you're kind of going more through the motions of doing something rather than genuinely enjoying it. There's also such a thing as guilty pleasures too, you know, like you might be able to make cases for why something is objectively bad, just like I could, you know, go through most games and give you reasons why, like, Cyberpunk's objectively bad or Destiny's objectively bad, but there's also good things in those games as well. And you might still enjoy that, which is just, you know, that's what they call a guilty pleasure. I actually saw a post on Twitter this morning where a guy was talking about a PS2 game, Dirge of Cerberus, which is a Final Fantasy game that lets you play as Vincent Valentine. It's like a third-person shooter. Objectively, it's a pretty bad game. Like, in terms of gameplay and stuff, it was kind of like weird, but you know, you can think of some positives, such as the cutscenes were amazing. Like, the visuals were insane because, of course, it's Square Enix, and back in PS2, it was already looking like PS4 style type graphics and all that for their cutscenes, at least. And you can enjoy them. That could be your guilty pleasure, but that doesn't change the fact that something could be objectively bad, or that maybe you just do something due to maybe have an addiction, or you just enjoy a certain component of a game, and you don't enjoy the game as a whole. You know, like, to give you an example, if you're a gambling addict and you don't like combat games or RPG games all that much, maybe still you might get hooked on something like a gacha like Genshin Impact, just because of the fact that you got the whole loot box gambling system going on. That might be your thing, and you just get hooked, you know? My girlfriend likes doing stuff with chance a lot, like loot boxes and things of that nature. And she was kind of a big fan of Breath of the Wild. Now, that doesn't mean that Genshin Impact is necessarily very much like Breath of the Wild, but she wanted to consider giving Genshin Impact a try just because of the gacha system in and of itself. And if she doesn't enjoy all those other things, maybe that would still be enough for her to play it. That's the same case with her in Injustice 2. You know, her biggest thing was trying to get the outfits in Injustice 2, loot boxes, but she didn't necessarily enjoy like stringing together the longest combos and finding out the most effective punishes, like whiff punishes and stuff like that. You could get hooked on one element of a game and just play it. Now, does that mean that game is good? No. It just means you enjoy that specific thing. If you enjoy grinding, hey, maybe Destiny's your thing. You enjoy trying something 50 times to get one piece of loot, maybe Destiny's your thing. But if I want an immersive universe with like a badass protagonist, with AI that makes me feel like I'm there, a universe that makes me feel more incorporated, I'm going to choose Halo over Destiny, because that's just what the experience that it provides it. And then, you know, depending on the game, you can say that it's subjectively better. That's just what I have to say about that.
All right, but then we've been talking for quite a bit now about developers going through struggles and all these companies over promising, under delivering. But talking about these guilty pleasures, again, there's millions of people that support Destiny. There's millions of people that support games like Genshin Impact. What's the lesson being taught? I mean, what's the point of making Last of Us style game with all this amazing story and all that? What's the point of making God of War when you can just make Destiny and Genshin Impact and just bank?
Well, not only will people most likely eventually get tired of something that's objectively not that great, just like how I know there's tons of people who are just instantly always getting burnt out on Destiny now. Like, it'll be like, oh, expansion. Then a week later down the line, people are just like, nah, this is shit. I'm tired of it. And then for some reason, you guys keep playing it, which is, I think that's just unhealthy towards you at this point. Because, you know, you're kind of at that point just supporting something which I don't even think you guys even think you like. You're just like thinking about the good old days, like, or the good moments you did have on it, and then you're like, oh, but we could have a part of it, whatever. That's a little bit of a deeper conversation, though. That's like something we gotta, maybe eventually we should end up giving the podcast a direction where we sit down and just talk about meta stuff rather than just like current events and video games and all that. Because maybe once we get enough episodes out of the way where we talk about general topics, we'll start just having meta conversations or whatever. But so your question to me was basically that, like, if you can see these numbers, right, that Destiny's pulling these numbers, what's the point of making anything good? Well, look, I'm a big Star Wars fan, right? And I love the prequels, you know? I love the prequels. They're objectively, some of them are pretty bad. Like, episode 1 was pretty bad. Episode 2 was pretty bad. But you can find your enjoyment in it, and I watch it, and you know, I like it, but that doesn't mean I know it's not bad. And the thing is that, you know, even though there was some elements of badness in like episode 4 and episode 5 and episode 6, as much as episode 5 was like pretty darn near perfect, and you know, episodes 1, 2, and 3, they also had their like badness or whatever in them. I mean, it's weird because it's a movie, right? It's hard to compare a movie to a game. You still manage to find, it goes back to what I was telling you. You find an element of it that you enjoy. Obviously, I like George Lucas's work. If you strip the bad elements out of Star Wars, it would be even better. But it managed to be good enough with what's in it that it's still worth rewatches to me. It's just that for me, it's like Destiny. When you're looking at Destiny, I don't really see it as like original trilogy versus prequel trilogy, right? I see it more as like George Lucas Star Wars versus Disney Star Wars. You know, when you look at Destiny versus Halo, like Bungie Halo, a lot of the original team that worked on Halo was gone when they were working throughout Bungie. You know, the same people weren't even like in charge anymore, really, at that point, when you think about it. And then on top of that, you bring in a corporate entity like Disney, which is Activision, who starts manipulating the game. They start telling you what you can and can't do with the game. And it comes at the artistic value of the game. Like, they start to interfere with your vision, and then you just lose it, you know? And I didn't really support and I don't support Disney Star Wars outside of like the Mandalorian and all the good things that they do, but I didn't support the sequel trilogy because, I mean, it's bad, you know. I can't even say it's a guilty pleasure. Now, there are people that do like it, so interesting enough, it still ties into our conversation that we're trying to have, but it's a complicated discussion, I guess, you know. And objectivity starts to get mixed into it because there are so many people coming up with these like nth tier, ninth dimensional like IQ arguments for defending the sequel trilogies and why they were good. And the whole time I was saying, no, you could tell this wasn't planned. You could tell this was bad. You could tell that, like, no, man, it's planned. Like, it's so good. Like, can't you tell that this is what they're going for or whatever? And then the trilogies come out, and then people are like, no, it's bad, no, it's good, and then everyone's fighting each other. It's like, no, you suck because you like it. No, you're just a bigot because you don't like it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, the actors themselves came out, and they were just like, it wasn't planned. Like, Daisy Ridley herself was just like, oh, yeah, no, they told me, like, last minute, like, Emperor Palpatine's, like, my grandpa or whatever, you know? Yeah. Like, in the last movie. And it's just, what do you do then? You know, because the whole thing is, right, these games, movies, they're developed in the background, right? And they sell you the idea that, yes, Destiny is an amazing adventure, and it's this great thing that we planned from day one, and this is what it is, and you're going to like it, and thus you should support it, and you should play by grinding and get loot or whatever. But if you
bro, calm down there. Looks like you're about to beat me up with your frustration. Like, calm down.
I'm just tired, man. I don't know if you can tell, but I've been tired today. But the point is, you know, when you really sit down to think about it, you could just notice these things, you know? Like, you could just sit down and see that I don't think the love for Destiny is there as much as it was for Halo. I don't think the game really offers as much as that one did. You know, all you Destiny fanboys and girls, whatever, tell me whatever you want, but that's just how I see it. You know, you could have your fun with the game. You could have your guilty pleasure with the game. You can think it's good. I think you could still point at it and say that there's objective bad in it. Like, I don't know. We're just getting to such a meta thing right now. Like, humans are entitled to like whatever you want to like, you know? And I'm not anyone to tell you guys what to like and what not to like. But ultimately, when it comes to like chasing perfection or like getting something as good as possible, I just can't justify, you know, trying to enjoy myself with something like that when I know it could have been so much more. And there's so many other things out there that I could enjoy myself on anyway. But I'm having a hard time finding any game to enjoy right now as it is. So I don't, you know, let's not even go down that path, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with your sentiment there, and I totally didn't expect the crapping of the Star Wars sequels out of nowhere. I mean, I guess we're gonna crap on Star Wars in this podcast quite a bit, specifically, you know, the Kathleen Kennedy trilogy. I call it the Kathleen Kennedy trilogy because she's the one that owns up for all the responsibility. No hate against her, but she made a lot of the calls and decisions, and it's well known that many of the problems that the sequels have are because of her decision. But I digress. You know, I see where you're going for, but these are the things that I see where the company's going for, and although I'm excited for it because I'm seeing that developers are slowly starting to realize what they need to do to make these systems viable. It also is kind of sad because it's kind of like it's the EA CEO, and I'm so sad I can't remember his name right now, but he's been saying this for quite some time. His game, he considers all his games to be games as a service, and he considers single player to be slowly dying out. I don't know if his sentiment has changed that, but I remember in like 2014 or 2015, he made a comment out where it's like single player isn't really out there anymore. It's all about the multiplayer co-op, and he was kind of right. As soon as all these games as a service games came out, and Destiny and Division, all that stuff, like those were the games that really picked off and made some real buku bucks, right? That whole idea of the social aspect of you playing with a friend is what made those games what they are, and it took a life of its own. Destiny has gotten like over 100 million players. Call of Duty Warzone has gotten over 100 million players, and all these games are really taking off. And the smaller games that are really starting to be works of art, like God of War, Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and I'm calling off Sony's exclusives because I'm a Sony fanboy. But even then, like Witcher 3, these games all make a profit, but especially GTA, they all make a massive profit because of how great they are. But unless they have something like what GTA did, where they incorporated both a games as a service and a single player portion to their game, they don't really take off to have that kind of fame. Other than, oh yeah, these are great one-off experiences, especially Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Where it's like, yeah, it's a great 200-hour adventure. After the month's over, the conversation dies down because there's no consistent update to keep the conversation going. And that's what I think what games of service does. It like continuously keeps the conversation going for a title, making it relevant, which is what people are mistaking for a good game.
So there's a lot to unpack there. The big thing is that there's a market for anything, you know. So you want to hit the need, or you want to meet the need of your market audience by releasing a certain game, right? You know, obviously the same people that play WoW maybe aren't the same people who are interested in Call of Duty. The same people that are interested in Call of Duty aren't the same people that are necessarily interested in Mortal Kombat. Now, people can play all different types of games, you know, that's a big thing, but ultimately the question comes down to or the idea is that you should always be wanting the best version of something that it could be. You know what I mean? Like, how can I put it? So it's not really for me about single player versus multiplayer, because like you said, single player games still manage to find their success. I mean, look at Nintendo. They almost deal exclusively in you know, single player games, and they're considered to be one of the more successful like platforms for video games and stuff like that right now. And a lot of the games do have multiplayer elements, but you know, a lot of the time people just be doing single player stuff with those games, right? It's not really about making a strong single player element for Destiny to work. It's just a lot more than that, man. Like, ultimately, when you sit back at the end of the day, like, you know, and you think back on the majority of the time you play Destiny, my question to you is, did it really feel like that big space adventure that you were promised with Destiny? Or like when they were promised by Bungie when they were starting Destiny? Or did it ultimately really just feel like, yeah, I had a couple fun moments here and there with my friends, but ultimately I log on, I fight the same enemies like 100 times, then I log off, and then I wait for the next expansion? You know, the way a game makes you feel is very, very important to me. And, you know, yeah, yeah, it's just not there for me with a lot of the stuff that the game industry is putting out now, man. Now, there's some games that do have that magic. Funnily enough, God of War is one of them. Fighting games for me tends to still be one of them. Like Street Fighter 5 kind of missed the mark for me a little bit. Maybe I just have to play a little bit more, but it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't as exciting as Street Fighter 4 was for me. Smash Bros. Ultimate, obviously awesome. I mean, you saw how I reacted when they announced Sephiroth. I almost had like a stroke. I was just like, oh. I don't know, man. It's just, I think I'm getting pretty spent on the conversation already, so we should probably start wrapping it up. But this could be a topic for another time. I don't know what topic we would call this or whatever for another episode. But it is an interesting conversation, to say the least. Just, I don't know, something about how nostalgia factors into gaming, and maybe just how games are being released now, how they make you feel, and that sort of thing. I don't know. It's like a deeper conversation.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I didn't want to get too deep with it. I thought maybe we could go down the rabbit hole, but I guess just to wrap it up, in general, again, going back to the question, like, what's the direction of development should take? Because despite the fact that we have all these misgivings in the throughout the company, like, each company sees it, it's public, but they all keep falling down like dominoes one after another. So I mean, what's the plan? Should they just continue to make games as they are now and continue to profit and never make another good game again, or should they all try to make a God of War style game? Like, what? I don't know what to tell you. I personally think, I still think, despite the fact that you hate games of service, I personally think it's viable, it's possible, and in the right hands, it can be done. I mean, GTA did it, and if they even get like any bigger, they could actually provide like super expansions to their games while adding more monetization to their thing, and like just constantly producing. But I have to admit that, you know, there's a little bit of MVP in there where, you know, why are they going to make an expansion which is what was originally promised in GTA 5, when they can just make like 5 t-shirts, 10 cars and whatever, and then still make the same amount of profit, if not triple the amount of profit. And I think what you're saying is true, that it's the money that people are giving. The fact that people have evangelized cosmetics has been somewhat of the downfall, or not the downfall, but like the downswing in the game development scene that has caused all this work abuse and all this stuff to overturn our game to be good, just good enough for cosmetics to be sold. And I think we've actually talked about this before. It's like people have to start to realize that if they don't create a proper story, and by story I don't mean like just like a plot, I mean like creating the narrative to their game, the branding, there's no point anymore. So I feel pretty bad about that.
To answer your question, because the question was like, what's your question? You said your question was, how do we get game developers?
No, it's like what direction should they go? Because I mean, we clearly talked about how it's been crap, but despite the fact that it's been crap, they're still profiting. So it's like, what's the point of turning around? Just continue slinging crap left and right to each fan and still make money. So what did they learn from this? What direction should they take from all the crap that we've learned today about Cyberpunk? Like, what do they learn from that? It's like, great, I should just lie to my consumers and still make money. It's like, what do they learn? What should they do? What direction should they take?
Well, I think the big thing is with games like Destiny and stuff is that while admittedly I think they're kind of crappy, they did have a certain innovation with them because Destiny was the first of its kind. One of two things can happen. Either Bungie can get this formula. Now, I don't think it's going to get fixed with an expansion by any means. Like, the problems that it has in Destiny has to be like a new game. You have to refocus, get something done, consider finding a way to maybe put all the Destiny goodness in there. Maybe finally consider making a campaign that's just meh, you know, whatever. But they need to make a new game with a similar formula and just get it right, you know? Like, maybe if they get it right and they keep the core of what Destiny is, it could happen. Otherwise, I feel that what's going to happen is, since these games are so quick to have burnout on them, that, like, the companies will no longer continue to be rewarded for it. Like, yeah, Destiny's doing fine now, but I feel like if, as the years goes on, Bungie just keeps doing the same thing, it will eventually die out. You know, ultimately, I think it's always just more profitable for you to make better games. But ultimately, like, I don't even know, like just like how Emerald said earlier, like leaving Destiny out of the equation, because let's just say Destiny's a subjective gray area where people could say it's bad, it's good. Games like NBA, like 2K and like the football ones and all that, like Madden and everything, you literally know it's the same game because, like, there's been like instances of texture showing that they forgot to update the year and stuff. And I don't know, I'm just kind of disappointed. Like, how do people still support that, you know? Like, that's why I said this conversation is so meta. Like, I can't even give you the proper answer to that, because if I tell you, hey, sir, I'm here to screw you over, I'm going to take your wallet. But you get to have some semblance of fun or whatever. That's not even the right example. I'm already starting to just, like, drift off a little bit. Like, how do you agree to that? Like, how do you agree to pay a full $60 for the same game again? Like, it's not even, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Like, it's not even like the Call of Duty where, like, oh no, it's the same game, but it's like, oh no, they had a new campaign and new guns and all. Like, it's the same game. It has maybe like a different monetization scheme in it, and that's it. It's the same game. And like, because, okay, same game. Like, you could say Smash 4 to Ultimate. Literally, Ultimate was basically like like, I don't know how to say it, like a touch up of Smash 4, right? Where they got all the characters from all the games and put them in the entire roster. Then they added new characters to the DLC. They made the graphics better, added new maps, added new game modes, added like a campaign or whatever. So, same game, you know? But like, NBA 2K is literally like the same game. and people still like. I think I looked at it on Social Blade or something, and the top streamer right now on Twitch, or at least a couple months ago, was a guy who plays FIFA. It's the same game. So maybe I'm stupid, maybe I'm ignorant. Like, I don't know. Life has proven me wrong about a lot of things constantly. I myself can't bring myself to play those games because I just know. Like, I just know. The fact that I know just deeply disturbs me to the point where I want no association to that. But I don't know, man. Maybe our fellow humans aren't that sharp and they're just looking for that quick dopamine and just give me the same game.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. I mean, specifically the FIFA games, as you mentioned, and the NBA games, they literally are the copy of themselves. If they were to fall under the games as a service plan, which is what I would be telling you every year,
the hierarchy of games as a service, those are considered the top tier.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if those games were to be like games as a service is, instead of you paying $60 every year to restart your progress, you would just get a reset wipe and you'd only pay like $40. That would be like the big difference. You'd save $20 instead of getting anally shafted with $60 purchases year over year, and now $70 because it's next gen. So I mean, with the games of service thing, you'd probably only be paying $40 or $50. You see what I'm saying? But it's just like,
that is games as a service, though. That's like they're considered the pinnacle of games as a service.
No, I know they are, but the problem is that they're advertising as a new game every year when we know it's not, right? And Destiny doesn't advertise Beyond Light as the next Destiny game. They advertise it as an expansion.
Well, tying it back into what we were talking about, that's why I think we need legal action to finally be brought up against game developers, because how is there not a law in place that actively punishes these people for releasing the same game with a different title? You're advertising it as a different new game. Like, how is that even legal? And how do people support it? I don't get it.
All right, well, let's summarize now, because it seems like we've already reached the end of the fumes on this train ride. Basically, the developers need to figure out what they want to do. I hope that Cyberpunk has become a widespread lesson where all developers look at it. It's like, all right, we need to stop trying to monetize everything every 5 seconds and actually focus on making a product. If developers would just sit down or leaders, let's say the leaders, because technically developers are obviously passionate about their artwork and they don't want anything to go bad. It's technically leaders that push most of these problems to happen, or shareholders. If we're all to just sit down and just think, damn, how do we get a slice? How do we turn our game to be so amazing that it's inviting, like a Disney movie? Where every time a Disney movie comes out, aside from Star Wars, has been extremely inviting. I have to put that out there. I mean, the Marvel movies have been extremely inviting, and any movie that comes out of Pixar, DreamWorks, and all these other companies, they're all super inviting, and they know what they're doing. They have their formula down. It's like which they need to figure out. Okay, let's figure out our niche, work on it, and then try to expand upon it so we can grow into what we want, which is something like games as a service, rather than just immediately jumping into games as a service. Do what you said, where it's like you slow down, you figure out what the main plan is, and then you slowly update it over time until you get to be able to get to that games as a service plan. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure if Ubisoft is given the direction of Santa Monica, you know, they'd probably be able to make a God of War-esque game into games of service somehow, and it'll be the most spectacular thing on the planet, because they have a central creative team that is beyond anything right now, or one of the central creative teams, and at the same time they're backed by 6,000 plus employees to do whatever they want. That's something that we have to wait and see if it'll happen. Anyway, close it off. Michael, take us away.
All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Oh, my camera froze again. Give me 1 second here. I got to see what's wrong with that. That's probably my computer running on fumes at this point. All right, there we go. All right, so thank you guys for joining us so much. I think starting next week, we might stop streaming on Twitch for the Co-Op Syndicate. We might move to YouTube. Stay tuned on the Discord to get more news about that. In case you guys want to follow us on Discord, the links to that are going to be in the description down below on the YouTube, or also on the About Me page on our Twitch. If you feel like supporting us, consider going to our Patreon, where we offer tons of rewards for all the different tiers that you could support us at patreon.com/Co-op Syndicate. You know, thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to follow Jordan on his socials, he's either Jordan G Marcos or JG underscore Mark1. That's JG underscore MARC1 on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And you can also check out his blog at thepositiveplayer.com. If you want to follow me on any of my socials, it'll be Michael C. Moore at Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch as well. We play games over there, so go ahead and join us. Thank you guys again so much for watching and listening. This has been your co-host, Michael C. Moore.
This is your other co-host, Jordan G. Marcos.
And until next time, guys, happy gaming. We'll see ya.